Chapter 1, The Fire That Sees. Feel the dry heat of the crackling firewood in the central hearth. Hear the respectful silence that falls over the house as the last spoonful of soup is scraped from the bowl. See the flames dance, not like ordinary fire, but like eyes that observe, ears that listen, hands that guard. This is the home of the Ainu. And at its heart, seated invisibly upon the embers, is Kamuy Fuchi, the grandmother of fire. In the oral traditions of the Ainu people of northern Japan, from the Kuril Islands and Sakhalin, she is not a symbol, but a living presence. While other Kamui inhabit mountains, rivers, or the body of the sacred bear, Kamuy Fuchi chose to live among humans, in the irori, the domestic hearth where the family gathers to eat, heal, cry, and laugh. Sent from the heavens with a handful of embers and a sacred task, she came not to rule, but to witness. Kamuy Fuchi sees everything, whether you offer the first piece of fish to the hearth before eating, whether your words at night are sweet or sharp, whether you open the door for the traveler even when supper is ready. She doesn't judge like a court, but like a mirror, revealing what is already in the heart. In the Ainu worldview, fire is not just heat, but ramat, the spiritual energy that connects all things. The hearth is the visible heart of the house. If it beats generously, the Kamui send abundance. If it pulsates with pride, disregard, or lies, Kamuy Fuchi withdraws, silently, without warning. And when she leaves, the fire still burns, but it no longer warms the soul. An ancient Kamui Euchre tale tells of a hunter who lied about sharing his prey. That night, the flames moved away from him. The next morning, the irori was cold, and the fire did not return. Only years later, with hands calloused from honest work and a tongue cured of falsehood, did he return, and whispering "Irankarapte, Kamuy Fuchi," truthfully, an ember leaped from the ashes and rekindled the hearth. Because Kamuy Fuchi doesn't demand perfection, only truth. And now, in a distant home, a young Ainu woman lights the hearth for the first time since her grandmother's death. She brings fresh fish, sake, and a heart full of doubt. The flames flicker, and wait. Chapter 2, The First Offering. Smell the aroma of smoked fish mingled with the smoke of hickory charcoal, sacred wood, carefully chosen. Hear the soft crackle of the first flame licking the dry bark, like a sigh of relief after a long silence. Watch the trembling hands of Aki, the young Ainu girl, pour a golden stream of sake onto the newly born embers. She wasn't taught in temples. There are no temples among the Ainu, but in the silent gestures of her grandmother, mother, and grandfather, never blow on the fire, offer the first bite to the hearth, speak softly at night. All of that was left behind when her grandmother died and her mother moved to Sapporo, where the fire comes from a blue button. Aki, born amidst ancestral song and the noise of the cities, spent years away from the irori, until today, when she returned to her almost ruined home in Nibutani, feeling only an absence that seemed to await her. With her hands soiled with earth and a heavy heart, she cleaned the hearth, rearranged the 7 stones in the ancestral circle, and lit the fire with patience and a whispered prayer. Irankarapte, Kamuy Fuchi. She doesn't know if she deserves to be heard, but she offers the fish in 3 directions, east, center, west, and the sake, drop by drop. She sits in silence, as her grandmother used to, letting the fire speak first. The flames grow, but they don't dance. They rise straight, solemn, as if assessing her. She remembers the deepest lesson. Kamuy Fuchi doesn't answer with miracles, but with presence. If it accepts the offering, the warmth will enter the bones. If not, the fire will burn, but it won't warm. At that moment, Aki understands that she is not just rekindling embers, she is asking to belong again. But something stirs in the shadows. Days before, a man from the city, who claimed to be a descendant of the Ainu, had come to the village with plans to sell the land. He sat by the empty irori, laughed loudly, poured beer on the extinguished fire, and mocked the dead superstitions. The embers didn't rekindle for him, and the spirit of the house was wounded. Now, Kamuy Fuchi, feeling Aki's call, faces a choice: accept the house back or demand reparation. Aki doesn't know this yet, but the flames do. And, little by little, they begin to bow towards him, as if finally recognizing a daughter who has returned, bringing with her not perfection, but truth. Chapter 3, The Silence That Judges. Feel the weight of the silence that settles after the flames recognize Aki, not an emptiness, but a sacred space, as if the house itself were breathing a sigh of relief. Hear the crackling of the embers forming an almost sung rhythm, echoing the verses of the ancient Kamuy Euchre. See the sake vapor rise in fine spirals, enveloping Aki like a veil of blessing. Kamuy Fuchi is present, not with voice or form, but with a healing warmth. Aki feels in her bones a lightness lost since childhood, the return of the ramat, the spiritual energy that connects home, body, and cosmos. But its presence is never passive, it is an active witness. That night, in a dream, her grandmother takes her to the dark corner of the house, where Aki finds upon waking a rusty coin and a cigarette butt, vestiges of the city man, who returned to mock the extinguished fire, defying the spirits with laughter and disrespect. The offense was registered not only by the winds, but by the very absence of fire. And, in the Ainu tradition, there is no automatic forgiveness, there is reparation. With firm hands, Aki buries the profane objects under a sacred willow tree, washes the stone circle with spring water, offers fresh food, and sings, trembling but determined, a fragment of the ancestral song. The flames respond, they dance higher, shine with a deep amber, like smiling eyes. But Kamuy Fuchi demands more than rituals, it demands continuous loyalty. Aki understands, finally, that relighting the hearth is not only to warm oneself, but to honor those who came before and protect those who will come after. She leaves the door ajar, not out of carelessness, but by invitation, for, as her grandmother used to say, the house where Kamuy Fuchi dwells never closes its door to the honest traveler, but the wind knows how to drive away the false ones. That night, something stirs in the forest. It is not the man, it is the bear, the great Kamuy of the mountain, who only appears when spiritual balance has been restored. He smells the wind, looks at the house, and emits a low groan, the song of approval from the spirits. Kamuy Fuchi heard it. The other Kamuy did too. But the final test is yet to come. Because the man will return, not with empty words, but with fire in his hands. And then, it will no longer be Aki alone before the hearth, but the house itself, alive and vigilant, ready to decide who deserves to cross its threshold. Chapter 4, The Fire Burned by Pride. Feel the acidic smell of gasoline mixed with pine smoke, an odor that doesn't belong in the forest. Hear the aggressive crackle of a plastic lighter, followed by dry laughter that cuts through the stillness of the early morning. See the shadows of 3 men stretching out in the snow before Aki's house, while Takashi, a distant descendant of an Ainu branch that has renounced its customs, pours dark liquid onto the thatched roof. Dressed in symbols of a rootless modernity, he hasn't come to negotiate, but to extinguish. If this hut is so sacred, may the spirit of the little fire save it. He lights a torch and throws it. But the fire doesn't catch. The flame dies upon touching the thatch, as if sucked into the night. He tries again, and the torch breaks in his hands. The wind, in response, is not fury, but precision. It extinguishes the match with a short, almost ritualistic breath. Inside the house, Aki is already facing the irori. The flames do not tremble, they stand firm, silent, in a defensive posture. She does not ask for protection, she offers loyalty. She pours coarse salt onto the embers and whispers, "I rancor-apt, Kamuy Fuchi. This home is yours. I am your daughter." Outside, the confrontation takes another form. From the middle of the forest emerges the bear, not to attack, but to witness. Motionless, its eyes reflecting the distant glow of the hearth, it causes Takashi's friends to retreat. But it is in Takashi's face that the true punishment is revealed, not the fear of the animal, but the recognition of an ancestral memory. He remembers the words of his grandfather, who saw a bear on the night he dishonored the fire. At that moment, he understands, he is not before a hut, but a spiritual pact that he broke not with blood, but with disrespect. He turns his back in silence. Before disappearing into the forest, he casts one last glance, and sees, in the windows, not flames, but eyes. Kamuy Fuchi did not burn him, he returned to him the shame, the deepest Ainu justice. The following morning, Aki finds bear tracks and, before the door, an unexpected offering, a fresh fish on a maple leaf. Takashi did not bow, but his gesture of retreat was accepted by the Kamuy. Aki takes the fish to the hearth, offers half to the fire, and the flames, for the first time in decades, smile. Still, the balance is fragile. The city will not give up. But Kamuy Fuchi's true test will not come from external enemies. It will come from the silent forgetfulness that can be born even within one's own home, when rituals become empty habits, and memory, longing without action. And Aki knows, keeping the fire burning is more than resistance. It is continuous responsibility. Chapter 5, The Supper That Separates Hearts. Feel the aroma of the smoked fish slowly cooking over the embers, not rushed, not wasted, but treated as a sacred gift. Hear the sound of the broth bubbling in the iron pot, in rhythm with the verses Aki softly sings, learned in dreams with her grandmother. Watch the smoke rise in gentle spirals, as if carrying prayers to the cloudless Ainu winter sky. The house is at peace, but Aki knows that peace, like fire, needs to be fed not only with firewood, but with intention. Today, she receives a visit from Yui, her cousin from Tokyo, raised far from the customs and full of superficial enthusiasm. How cute this fireplace is. It even makes me want to post it on Instagram. Yui's smile is affectionate, but her eyes see the irori as scenery, not as a spiritual heart. Aki feels a tightness in her chest, not of judgment, but of pain. Because Yui, unknowingly, has already broken the pact simply by speaking before the fire as if it were mere decoration. During the day, Aki shows Yui the paths of the forest, teaches her about medicinal roots, and tells stories of the bear that dances for the Kamuy. Yui listens as if listening to fables, fascinated, but distant. "Do you really believe in that?" she asks, while they eat corn soup. Aki doesn't argue, she points to the fireplace. Kamuy Fuchi is there. She isn't belief. She is presence. But Yui, without malice, pulls out her cell phone to film the smoke effect. At that moment, the flames recede, as if hiding. Then, pouring boiling water onto the irori and trying to blow on the embers, she commits a grave offense. Aki interrupts her firmly. Blowing on the fire is an offense. Human breath is impure. The silence that follows is heavy, but necessary. Yui apologizes, offers plain rice, and for the first time, sits in silence, without her cell phone, just listening. The embers grow again, but something has changed between them. There is no lack of affection, but there is a new distance, forged by the difference between seeing and merely looking. At the farewell, Yui leaves a notebook with a sincere note. "I don't know if I believe in spirits, but I believe in you." Aki smiles, keeping the gift near the fireplace. She knows that Kamuy Fuchi doesn't reject those who doubt, but those who refuse to see. Perhaps a seed has been planted. But the world outside doesn't wait for slow germination. The following week, an official letter arrives. The city hall plans to build a road that will cut through the sacred forest and pass 5 meters from the house. The community meeting will be on the next full moon, and everyone will have to choose between modernity and memory. Kamuy Fuchi observes in silence and prepares for its most difficult trial, not against a declared enemy, but against the silence of those who should speak, but prefer not to choose. Chapter 6, The Meeting Under the Full Moon. Feel the biting cold of the winter night, when even the wind seems to hold its breath. Hear the crunch of boots in the compacted snow, the tense murmur of voices gathered before the Nibutani community house. See the full moon reflected in the living room windows, but there is no warmth there, only cold light and heated decisions. The meeting has begun. Representatives from the city hall, with polite smiles and impeccable suits, promise progress, jobs, generous compensation. Some villagers nod, others exchange weary glances, already resigned to the logic that old customs don't pay the bills. When the mayor asks if there are any objections, silence falls, until Obasan Haru, almost a centenarian, raises her trembling but firm voice. "This forest is not just trees. It's where the Kamuy walk." An official replies condescendingly, "That's folklore." At this, Aki stands up. Not to fight, but to bear witness. "My house is not a plot of land. It's an altar. If you build that road, you will be cutting the thread that connects us to the spirits." But her words fall on ears already closed by the weight of despair and disbelief. The vote is announced. The majority chooses the road. Aki returns home with dry eyes, not from lack of pain, but because the fire demands more than tears, it demands firmness. Upon entering, she senses that the flames are not sad, but prepared. Kamuy Fuchi is not surprised by the betrayal of men, she foresaw it. In Ainu traditions, there is a clear teaching. When humans choose the easy path, the Kamuy do not punish them, they simply withdraw, and the world becomes colder. Aki understands that her mission has changed. It is no longer enough to protect the house. She needs to become a bearer of the fire, guardian and messenger. In the early morning, she prepares a traveling brazier with pottery tempered in the ashes of the irori tree, keeps a sacred charcoal, wraps offerings, salt, rice, a strand of her own hair, a symbol of total surrender. If the village has fallen silent, she will carry the voice of the fire to where there are still ears willing to listen. But Aki doesn't know that, by accepting this task, she is awakening something older than the village itself, the cry of the mountain Kamuy, who will not tolerate their territory being fragmented by railroads and oblivion. And Kamuy Fuchi, for the first time in generations, will not remain only in the hearth. It will walk with Aki, invisible to the eyes of the modern world, but present in every step, in every ember that resists, in every heart that still dares to choose the path of respect instead of profit. The journey will not be easy, but the fire has already decided, it will not be extinguished. It will be carried forward, until the world remembers that some homes are not built of wood, but of sacred memory. Chapter 7, The Walking Fire. Feel the weight of the ceramic brazier in Aki's hands, not heavy in pounds, but in responsibility. Hear the restrained crackling of the sacred charcoal, kept alive beneath a layer of white willow ash. See her footsteps in the snow, each marked like a silent prayer, as she leaves behind the home she loved and journeys toward the city that rejected fire. Kamuy Fuchi walks with her, not in visible form, but in the constant warmth emanating from the brazier, even under biting winds, not in words, but in the certainty that grows in her chest, as if each tree whispered, "You are not alone." Aki goes to Sapporo not to protest, but to bear witness. Her destination is the Ainu Memorial Museum, where, faced with an exhibition that treats her culture as extinct, she will ask to light an authentic hearth, not as a museum piece, but as an act of living resistance. The night before, she dreams of her grandmother, who hands her an empty bowl, fill it with what the world hasn't yet stolen. Aki wakes up with warm tears and the brazier brighter than ever. In the indifferent city, Aki walks with unwavering calm. Upon entering the museum, she doesn't demand space, she offers presence. I come in the name of Kamuy Fuchi. I ask for a corner. A stone. A small fire. To show that we are not dead memory. We are fire that still burns. The curator hesitates, but yields. That night, against all rules, a circle of stones is set up in the courtyard. Aki lights the sacred charcoal, pours sake, offers rice, and sings, for the first time in public, the Kamuy Yukur of the grandmother of fire. Few understand the words, but all feel the warmth, denser, more alive. Someone films. Someone cries. An old man hidden in the crowd whispers, "She's back," but the real miracle happens at dawn. The brazier remains lit without new wood, and at sunrise, the ashes form, with impossible perfection, the image of a standing bear. There is no scientific explanation, only the Ainu worldview, the mountain Kamuy herd. And now, they too walk. Back in the village, the bear's roar echoes in the mountains like an ancient warning. The ice on the stream breaks on its own, as if the earth had awakened. Obasan Haru smiles at the sky. Kamuy Fuchi hasn't gone away. She's just changed homes. But the conflict hasn't ended. The city hall, pressured by rumors and social media, sends a new representative, and among the signed documents is an unexpected name, Takashi, now a consultant on sustainable development. He doesn't come with torches, but with reasonable proposals. Aki, however, knows the truth: a negotiated fire is a fire already extinguished. And Kamuy Fuchi, guardian of balance and integrity, does not accept half measures, nor half-truths. The confrontation now will not be between tradition and progress, but between loyalty and convenience. And the fire, more than ever, will demand a choice, not with words, but with actions. Chapter 8, The False Mediator. Smell the varnished leather and expensive perfume, aromas that belong neither to the forest nor to the fire. Hear the metallic sound of a briefcase being opened on the cracked wooden table of the communal house. See Takashi enter, not with a torch, but with a tie, and in his eyes, a shadow that is no longer just pride, but doubt disguised as authority. "I came in the name of progress," he says, in a rehearsed voice, but also as someone who understands tradition. Aki doesn't get up. She doesn't need to. The brazier, now back to its irori setting, emanates a heat that makes even the most skeptical sweat. "You understood what you could," she replies calmly, "but you misunderstood." Takashi offers to reroute the road, create a cultural center, transform Aki's house into a tourist attraction. There is interest in the eyes of the villagers, even in Obasan Haru's furrowed brow. But Aki keeps her gaze fixed on the flames, motionless, like raised swords. Kamuy Fuchi is not a tourist attraction. It is not for sale. It is a dwelling place. Takashi insists, but his voice trembles. Aki responds with a truth that echoes beyond the village: the world has already stopped listening, stopped respecting. And that is why it is sick. But fire doesn't need the world. The world needs fire. These words touch something deep within Takashi, not his consultant logic, but the memory of the bear, the match that went out, the silent shame that has haunted him since that night. He is not there merely to negotiate. He is searching, even with his hands stained with the contract. "Then tell me," he asks, more quietly, "what should I do?" Aki looks at him with ancestral sadness, not judgment. "First, you must ask forgiveness from the fire. Not with the words of a businessman. With the gesture of a grandson." Takashi hesitates, removes his tie, and kneels before the fireplace. "I rancor-apt, Kamuy Fuchi, forgive my arrogance. I didn't see. But now. I'm trying." A sacred silence settles. The flames don't dance, but the heat transforms, deeper, like an embrace. Obasan Haru whispers, "She heard." That night, Takashi doesn't return to the city. He sleeps on the floor of the communal house and, at dawn, walks to the forest with a borrowed axe and an offering of dried fish. "I'll help mark the true boundaries of the sacred land," he tells Aki, not with GPS, but with respect. Kamuy Fuchi observes. For the first time in its long existence, it sees something rare, a heart that had drifted away, and returned of its own accord. But the fire doesn't celebrate. It knows the real test is yet to come. The government doesn't back down with pretty gestures. Soon, helicopters will fly over the forest, drones will map the ground, and the final decision will be made by a judge in Tokyo who has never seen a lit irori. And when that moment arrives, Kamuy Fuchi will face an impossible choice: to retire forever, or to show the world that fire doesn't need permission to exist. Chapter 9, The Judge Who Never Saw Fire. Feel the metallic hum of a helicopter cutting through the pure Ainu morning sky, a sound that belongs to no sacred place. Hear the murmur of the elders around the irori, not of fear, but of ancestral determination. Watch Aki wrap a piece of sacred charcoal in cotton cloth dyed with campio root, not as a relic, but as a living witness. The trial will be in Tokyo, in a court of white walls and soulless windows. The judge, Kenjiro Matsumoto, has never set foot in Nibutani, never heard a Kamuy euchre, never felt the healing heat, only the anesthetizing air conditioning. And yet, it will be up to him to decide the fate of the forest, the fire, and the people who inhabit them. Aki travels alone, carrying with her not documents, but ashes, not legal arguments, but presence. Before parting ways, Takashi hands her a bag of coarse salt, to purify the path, and to remember that fire doesn't need palaces. Only truth. In the indifferent capital, Aki resists the accelerated pace of the modern world. On the eve of the trial, she lights an improvised fireplace in her hotel room, on a metal tray, with stones from the sacred forest. She offers rice, whispers the song of the grandmother of fire. No one sees, but the mirror fogs up, and for a moment reflects eyes of flame. In court, the city hall lawyers invoke public interest and economic growth, dismissing the tradition as a family practice without legal basis. Aki rises not as a defendant, but as a bearer. Kamuy Fuchi doesn't live in temples. She lives in the fire that never goes out. She hands the judge a bowl of irori ashes. This is our writing. Not with ink. With presence. Upon touching them, the judge feels an inexplicable warmth, and that night he dreams of a grandmother with golden eyes, who points not to maps, but to her own chest. The following morning, the judge arrives with dark circles under his eyes, but with a new question: if we remove the road, what will you offer in return? Aki replies, continuity. We will maintain the balance that protects not only our village, but the rivers that supply your city. Before he announces his decision, an official bursts in with news from the Ministry of the Environment. The Sakhalin bear, a nearly extinct species, has been sighted precisely on the stretch of road planned. The judge closes his eyes and smiles, not in triumph, but in understanding. It wasn't he who decided. It was the spiritual world, even using human laws to make itself heard. But Kamuy Fuchi knows, victory is not the end. It is the beginning of a new duty. The village cannot merely survive, it must teach. And Aki, who carried the fire from the hearth to the courtrooms, will now be the bridge between two worlds, the world of sacred silence and the world of modern noise, the world of ancestral respect and the world of conscious progress. The fire has won, but its mission now is to illuminate, not just resist. Chapter 10, The Flame That Teaches. Smell the scent of new wood being polished, not for furniture, but for apprentice benches. Hear the sound of young voices repeating, hesitant but firm, the first verses of the grandmother of fire's Kamuy euchre. See the smoke from the irori rise in spirals that are no longer just prayer, they are a promise. The village didn't win a battle, it rekindled a pact. With the road closed and the forest declared a cultural spiritual protection zone, Aki's house has become the living fire center, not a museum, but a space where one learns to listen. Young Ainu return out of thirst, not obligation. Children offer the first morsel of rice to the fire. Elders teach how to choose the right firewood, the kind that honors, not offends. At the center of it all, Aki sits by the hearth not as a heroine, but as a continuous guardian, witnessing the rebirth of what was almost lost. Kamuy Fuchi is more present than ever, not because of the grandeur of the rituals, but because of the consistency of daily life. Even Yui returns, now with calloused hands and an open heart. The fire isn't about believing. It's about belonging. Takashi, removed from the corporate world, helps the elders map sacred paths. They say he sings alone at dawn, with a discordant but genuine voice. Obasan Haru, once bent by time, sits more upright and wisely corrects. Kamuy Fuchi never left. It was just waiting for someone worthy to see it. Aki understands, then, that the greatest danger was never the road. It was the silent forgetfulness within their own homes, when respect becomes an empty habit and memory, longing without action. Now, the flame not only warms, it teaches. It teaches that respect is a daily choice, not an occasional gesture, that fire doesn't punish with flames, but with absence, that a home without ethics is empty, even with stone walls. On full moon nights, when the bear silently descends to the edge of the clearing and watches the smoke rise, the Ainu know, the Kamuy are satisfied. Balance has been restored, not by force, but by humility. And Kamuy Fuchi remains in the irori, as she always has been, not as a distant goddess, but as grandmother who sees, hears, and above all, waits for each generation to choose, once again, to honor the fire that made us human. This story comes from the spiritual tradition of the Ainu people, passed down orally through generations in the forests of northern Japan, Sakhalin, and the Kuril Islands. If it touched you, comment, what ancestral lesson do you take from it?